My name is Matthew Sparazza.
I'm Father Sam Kachuba. How you doing, Matt?
I'm doing well, thank you. That was
All right.
very kind of you, Father Sam. Thanks for asking. Today, we are joined by Dr. Andrew Abela. He is the Dean of the Busch School of Business. He's also the author of, let's see, hold it up so everybody can see, Superhabits, the Universal System for a Successful Life. Now, I actually first came across your work, Dr. Abela, because you were giving a presentation at Legatus, and you were talking about virtues, and I got pumped. I was so excited that I immediately asked you to join us on the show, and you were gracious enough to do so. So thank you for being here. But before we even jump directly into the topic, although I guess this is a precursor to it, can you tell us how you ended up as the dean of the Busch School of Business and why you decided to write the book Superhabits?
Well, so I worked in business for about 12 years. I straight out of college, I went to work for Procter and Gamble in marketing, which was fun. And then I worked for McKinsey and Company, consulting firm, which was interesting. I worked with them all around the world. Um, and then in between, I got a master's degree and then a PhD, and then eventually ended up in teaching full time at the Catholic University of America here in Washington, D.C. And as a business professor, professor of marketing in our what was then a Department of Business and Economics, part of the School of Arts and Sciences. And after I'd been there about 6 years, our current chair was stepping down, and they needed a new chair, and nobody wanted to do it. And I was the young guy, and I missed meeting, so they made me chair of the department. And it's unusual in academia that you would have had serious management experience before, and I did. And so, by the grace of God, we achieved a lot in a short period of time. I remember one of the first things I did as new chair is took the faculty on an offsite for the day, and we came up with a 5-year plan and goals and new programs we were going to launch and so on. And about 2 years later, in a faculty meeting, we were kind of reviewing our progress. One of the faculty said, we've pretty much completed everything we set out to do for our 5-year goals in 2 years. And what should we do next? And so we said, well, let's have a 10-year goal to start a business school, because we were just a little department, just a kind of our own school. And our provost and president heard about that and said, great idea, do it now. And so we went and started the school, and they needed a dean, and they said, well, you're the chair, you should just become the dean. So that's hard not to be dean of our branch. So that was 12 years ago. So
The image that gave me was, the great Disney movie, The Jungle Book. There's the scene where all the elephants are lined up, and one of the elephant in charge says, "I need volunteers. Step forward," and they all take a step back except for the one who's just a little slower, and he ends up being chosen as the volunteer.
something like that. Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
I'm going to take us on a brief tangent here. This is totally irrelevant, but
It is the name of the show.
Yeah, it's the name of the show. So we embrace the name of the show. That is my son. My son's 2.5. He loves the Jungle Book music, but he loves it within the context of like a lullaby to go to sleep. So there was like a 3-week period where he would only go to sleep to the Elephant March. So that
Fantastic.
you bring up the Elephant March, and this is what I'm thinking about.
I think it's
Okay,
great.
tangent over.
Yeah.
So you fell into becoming the dean of the Busch School of Business. I also liked that the mention of the master's degree and the PhD, they sounded like asides. It was like you accidentally got those as well. I'm sure it was more intentional than that. But so how does this connect to Superhabits? Is Superhabits just like, I've heard you refer to it as a passion project, but is like the pursuit of virtue should be a passion project for everybody, I suppose. But tell us about that. How did that originate?
So when we started the business school, we thought we wanted to be a place where students aren't just learning about business, but they be formed in virtue or continue to form in virtue. And so we said we would do that, and we knew that in order to form somebody in virtue, you need 3 things. They need to understand about virtue, what it is. You cannot accidentally become virtuous. There has to be deliberateness to it. So you might do a courageous thing and succeed with it, but unless you know what courage is, you're not likely to do it repeatedly, and kind of So you first you have to know what it is. Second is you have to see examples of what it looks like, because nobody can
Mm.
give you a mathematical formula for a virtue. You can only look at it kind of in the wild, if you will, and not just in history, but in fiction too. Examples of virtues. So we needed that too. And that also meant we had to hire faculty who were virtuous because they would be role models, you know. And then the third and most important was that the students should practice the virtues. And that third bit we kind of left to accident and just sort of natural, consequences and so on. But as the years went by, I thought, we need to get more deliberate about this.
Mm.
We need to find ways to actually, and so on. But I thought we need some kind of place to anchor, which virtues specifically are we talking about, And the frustration was I looked at numerous books written by faithful Catholics about the virtues, and they couldn't agree on which were virtues and which weren't. They just had different lists. There was a lot of overlap, of course, but I thought to myself, if virtue is such a serious and important thing, and it is, then how come somebody doesn't have like, okay, here's the definitive list of the virtues, And then a friend of mine happens to be the dean of the School of Theology now, so he would know, right? Said, well, you should look to Aquinas. Aquinas has the definitive list. So I went in, this was around COVID times when we were all locked at home. I
Mm.
did what any good business dean would do, and I read the Summa from start to finish. Yeah. Actually, particularly the treatise on the virtues, the middle part, the Secunda Serendae. As I'm reading through it, I thought, wow, what a comprehensive and kind of complete vision of the virtues that he gives. All the virtues fit together. There are no gaps, no overlaps. It's a system, but the problem is, I love Thomas. He's just amazing. But even in English, he's hard to read because we have all these technical terms like irascible and concupiscible, and like, what? So I was hoping that somebody would kind of put it all together in a way that would be accessible to our typical business students, and nobody would. And so I thought I had to do it myself. So I just started a little bit a day working on it. Took a few years, and the result was the Superhabits book. And the name Superhabits is because there's a lot of enthusiasm about habits, not right now. So I wanted to make the point right from the title of the book that the virtues are the very best habits you could have,
Mm. Mm. I like the idea of a summa of the treatise on the virtues. That's what you've written. And the accessibility, I think, was something that was very striking to me. It's clear, at least as I was reading it, that this is something that you've designed to be accessible to really just about anyone. But in particular, I had the sense, maybe this is just me as a priest reading it, but I had the sense that you're writing this for people who are going to be involved in business and in professional life, to encourage them to some of the examples that you have. They struck me, the little vignettes that you'd have with different people, and almost each chapter begins with one of those little brief stories. But the way that some of their lives, either they exemplified the virtues or they lacked the virtues
Right.
and figured out that they needed them.
Yeah.
And you give these very concrete examples of very real people. I was excited to open it up and see Jason Trennert's name in there.
Yes,
Jason is a friend of the show. He was one of our early guests. So we should also tell people to pray for Jason.
Yeah.
He seems to be doing pretty well now, but he's gone through a rough year with cancer treatment and everything. But it was really nice to see him in there, as this is not just a concrete example, but actually somebody who we've met.
Yeah. Well, it was Jason's book, and kind of getting to know him, reading his book, My Side of the Street, about his time on Wall Street, which I really enjoyed reading because he and I are almost exactly the same age. And we had somewhat parallel careers where I went off into academia. So it was just fun to see what he was doing while we'd go to school at the same time and so on. But his story, and those of a few other Catholic entrepreneurs and successful executives, reading through and finding, these books are full of kind of wise advice and good kind of experience that you can gather without having to go through the knocks yourself. You can read those books. And I started to realize that what was in common among them were they were virtuous people. And so what I wanted to do is
Mm.
pull the best of these examples and say, okay, this is what virtue looks like. Now, the book is deliberately not only for Catholics, so I try to make it
Mhm.
accessible to anybody. So if you have a relative or a friend who's away from the faith or never, they can still read it and get a lot of benefit out of it. But if you're Catholic, you read it and understand the deep logic underneath it is very much our faith, because Father, as you know, the virtues are the form of the Christian life, right? The way we
Right.
live as Christians is to
Yeah.
live the virtues. They're not some kind of optional, nice, you know, preference that you might have or a way to kind of supercharge your spiritual life. It's like, no, that's the way we're supposed to live. So
As people pick up this book, is there a particular spot that you would suggest if they're going to start to live out these super habits? This is the starting point. This is the way to do it.
yeah, so
The super habit of super
so
habits.
right.
Yeah.
I spend a lot of time trying to figure out what sequence to write the
Mm.
book in. So I wrote the first 5 chapters, one virtue each, and as you know, the super habits model, Aquinas, has 50 super habits, 50 virtues. So I had some friends read the 5 chapters and they're like, oh, yeah, we love it. This is great. I said, oh, good. Could you read 45 more? They're like, I don't think so. We like it, but that's too much. So I thought, darn it, I got to find another way to deliver this. And so I thought about starting with the model itself, the 50 virtues. And then I thought, okay, that's going to be overwhelming. And so scratching my head and God bless my friends at Ave Maria, the provost, Roger Nutt there, once said to me, 'cause I belong to an organization that it started out of Ave called I think it's for the Association of Catholic Scholars and Artists. We get together once a year down in Naples.
Mm.
And he said, as members of that gives you, if you ever need like a condominium or a place to go finish a book or something, come on down. So a couple of Decembers ago, my wife and I went and they gave us this beautiful condominium right on Ave Maria Circle, overlooking the church there. We had a whole week. So we started the first day, went to the beach, of course. and we walked up and down the beach. It was December, so even Florida's kind of cool. Walked up and down. It's like, how is this going to work? And eventually we cracked it. The idea was let's start like the sort of gateway virtues that are part of the virtue of self-discipline. And it's actually Augustine, I think, points this out, that even though we normally name the cardinal virtues as prudence, justice, fortitude, temperance in that order, and that's sort of the hierarchy, with prudence being the charioteer of the virtues, they say. But in the way of development, you start at the bottom. You start with self-discipline, because if you have no self-discipline, you're just a slave to whatever you feel like doing, and nothing gets done.
Mm.
And then the next thing would be courage. So Aquinas gives us 15 different virtues of self-discipline, 15 different types of self-discipline for 15 types of desire that we might have. Because discipline is all about taking a desire that you have and redirecting it in the right direction, not suppressing it and not giving into it. Those would be the two extremes, but self-discipline is, okay, I have a desire for alcohol. Let me direct that in the healthiest way I can, which may mean don't, fulfill it with something else, not alcohol. So I started with the first 8 of those. Those are the first 8 chapters. The very first one is the virtue of restraint. Really simple first one to begin. I feel like doing this, but I know I'll regret it. The virtue of restraint is the habit of saying, okay, I feel like doing it, but I'm not going to do it right now. I'm going to go do something else for 10 minutes. I feel like buying this thing on Amazon. Okay, instead of that, I'm just going to put it on my wish list, or I'm going to wait till tomorrow. So that's the virtue of restraint. And there's lots of
That might be what the best kind of an example, because most people they want to get something, they go right on Amazon, they get it right away, they don't even think twice about it. I like this idea of restraint.
Right.
Put it on
Then
the
you have
wish
stuff
list.
you don't
Think
need.
about it for a day.
Right? Yeah. And the beauty of the research on restraint, and there's lots of it, it shows that doesn't matter how you practice it, whether you practice it with respect to Amazon or you're doing budgeting or with respect to food, it's one muscle, the restraint muscle,
Mm.
analogically speaking, but it works in all cases. So if you get better at not giving into buying stuff on Amazon, that same restraint will work in other aspects of your life as well.
Matt, do you remember our conversation about my acquired instrument syndrome affliction.
Yeah, it sounds like you could develop restraint.
Well, I could, but so this is the thing though. Before I bought the bazooki, I waited like 4 years.
Right.
So
So you're an incredibly virtuous person. Is what you're
Yes,
saying.
that's what I wanted you to say. Yes.
Yes,
Now it's
yes.
recorded.
Yes,
It's in there.
It's
It can never
official.
be-
You
it can
heard it
never
here,
be
folks.
unsaid.
Father Sam Kachuba,
It's
virtuous person.
There you go.
So I'm curious about this idea of restraint too, because I really like that self-discipline is the gateway to the development of virtue. Like that makes so much sense. And as you were talking about, like specifically that Amazon example, which is that in the book, the Amazon example? Or was that just off the top of your head?
Off the top of my head, it might be.
Okay.
I don't,
Right. Fair enough. Right. You wrote the book a while ago. Fair enough. But so Amazon is, let's say, like it's used by, I think, safely, right? Like what?
everyone.
95% of Americans, right? Like, so everybody, it's ubiquitous, right? It's everywhere. And so that would be an example where like we have this like major force in American culture where that is like encouraging a vice of I don't know, rash judgment or like rash purchasing. That's not really, I don't know if you could say it that way, right? But like
Impulsiveness.
Great. Yes, great. Right. So like, is there a primary super vice that one needs to, I guess impulsiveness might be it, but like that one might need to combat, or that you see in American culture today?
Yeah, for restraint in particular, it would be impulsiveness. But more
Right.
generally, it's just kind of doing what you feel like, and that's the enemy of happiness, and in psychology, there have been two kind of opposing schools that, in a sense, represent the two extremes opposing self-discipline itself. Because every virtue has generally two opposing vices related to too much and too little, right? And then the virtue
Right,
of
okay.
being. So self-discipline, the one extreme would be do whatever you feel like. I feel like doing something, I do it. And all kinds of trouble arises from that, right?
Mhm.
And so that's the vice of being kind of undisciplined. But this is interesting. The other extreme is like be very suspicious of everything you feel like, and sort of repress your desires.
Mm.
And that's also a vice. I think Aquinas calls it mirthlessness, which is the kind of person that just kind of goes through life like stealing himself. I'm not going to do anything fun. I just like sort of almost puritanical. Just like if I want to do something, it's a sign that I probably shouldn't. But both of those are extremes, unhealthy extremes. And so what we're supposed to do, I think this is really important. People tend to equate self-discipline with willpower. There's a slight connection, and you need a little bit of willpower to get started, but they're not the same thing. Because willpower is just sort of your will imposing itself on your desires, right? So you might feel like doing this, but you're going to do that. That's not really self-discipline, because if you try to go through life always willpowering your way through against what you feel like doing, you exhaust yourself, because willpower is very finite. You just get drained. You probably had that experience,
Too often.
Yeah, especially with young kids. Like, they wear me out. So instead, what growth and discipline looks like is to take the particular desire that you have and try to train it into a more healthy direction, a more constructive direction. So, for example, with diligence is a virtue, right? It's a super habit. It's part of the virtue or the super habit of self-discipline. And it is the virtue for dealing with the desire to know. We all want to know things, right? That's why we spend hours on social media. We're just curious to see what's going on. We read, we watch videos and so on. But if you spend hours on social media, that could just be a royal waste of time, So instead, what you want to do is take that desire to know and try to tease it into areas that would be more constructive. Like, I would like to know how to speak Italian, for example, or I would like to know more about how AI works, and just kind of start to redirect that. And then what happens is that that becomes a habit, and so that you start enjoying your studies, for example, if you're a student. And what a crazy idea. So instead of using your willpower to do your homework, it's like, hey, this is interesting. I enjoy doing it, you know?
So you're changing your desires. You're literally, it's almost like you're creating a new, like you're treading a new path, right? Like you're disregarding the previous path and you're creating a new path.
Yeah, although you're kind of shifting it, because desires are good
Yeah.
because they're created by God, but they sometimes go astray because of original sin. So
Mm.
you're just kind of bringing them back to a better place. And
Mm.
the force of habit is such that you don't have to do that every day forever, you know. You just do it. It's the hardest the first day, less hard the second day, and so on. But eventually that becomes a habit, and then it's not difficult anymore, which is really a joyful idea, you know. It's like that.
Yeah.
That's why the virtuous people are the happiest people of all, because they find it easy to do, and they enjoy doing what they should be doing anyway. What a great place to be, you know?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. That's the goal. You know, so the other thing that this is making me think of, I'm going to try and connect a couple ideas here. I don't know when I found out that that like in a broad picture, salvation is not just about being saved from sin and like this. I mean, I was younger, right? But like that it's not just about like, quote, going to heaven, right? But that salvation has so much to do with human flourishing. And I think it's only become clearer and clearer. I'm a big fan of Dr. Greg Bottaro. He's the founder of Catholic Psych Institute. Father Sam is has gone through their CP-MAP program, so he's a brilliant guy. But
Dr. Greg, you mean?
No, I meant you, but Dr. Greg too. But Dr. Greg was recently talking about the idea that baptism, like, it saves us, but right, like, it also heals us, right? And in the sense that it heals us, I think you can connect it to this idea of virtue,
Yes.
which is like we can cooperate with grace and develop these virtues, right, or super habits, right, and we will be better for it,
Yes.
right? And so I think there's actually like a really, I'm thrilled that you wrote this book from the perspective that a Catholic can get the deeper meaning, but also it's accessible to a non-Catholic, because I think that this is actually an awesome on-ramp to Catholicism, you know? And it's also a great work of apologetics, maybe in like the classical sense, as opposed to a direct, objection. It's like you're just kind of like you're putting the thing before the faith, which is like, look at how this is good for you.
Well, a great example, the most direct example of what you're talking about would be anxiety and depression, right? So many people suffer from anxiety and depression. Sometimes there's serious chemical imbalance, and so medication is needed, right? But oftentimes, particularly in the less aggressive forms, the less intense, it's a lack of the virtue of resilience. It's classically the Latin word is patientia, so it's often translated as patience. But we think of patience of like, don't be in a hurry, But what Aquinas meant is he used the definition endurance through long sorrow. So it's the ability to feel sad for good reasons or bad, but keep on moving. And the remarkable thing about it is the more you grow in resilience, the less pain the sadness causes you. You become sort of more resistant to it, And for example, if you're suffering from clinical depression, sometimes it can be hard to get out of bed in the morning. You just want to lay in bed and just stay there and be depressed, But sometimes the best thing that you can do for that is get up and say, take a shower, Really hard to do that, but you'll feel a little bit better from doing that. And then the next morning it will be easier and easier, and you're building this virtue of resilience. I was talking to a psychiatrist, Harvard Medical School, psychiatry department, and he said that the latest versions of cognitive behavioral therapy, which is the kind of premier treatment for anxiety and depression, is pretty much identical to cultivation of the virtue of resilience. So there's Aquinas 750 years ago, nailed it, and we're just rediscovering that now. So it's really really powerful stuff. Like for much of what ails us, what I like to say, whatever's going wrong with your life, whatever's troubling you in life, there's a virtue for that, that you
Mm.
can acquire and make that part of your life so much better.
Hmm. Is there a good way that you found that can teach that virtue of resilience? Because I think that this virtue is so key, both on a personal level. I know that I need resilience. I need to be able to go through difficult things. I need to persevere. I need to grow in that capacity. But then there's also this other element. It's not just teaching it, or in my case, practicing it, trying to learn it. It's also like helping people to understand that they have the capacity for it also. I
Yep.
think
Mm.
very often for parents that can be a challenge, because they're looking at their kids and they're seeing a challenge placed in front of their kids, and they want to make sure their kid doesn't have any challenges. And so they think my child will never recover if this thing or that thing happens, or I don't want to challenge them too much. But if we can teach them that their children are resilient and have the capacity to get through this thing, then we might have something. So any tips for teaching resilience to people?
Yeah. So we used to talk about helicopter parenting, where you hover over the kids. And then there was
Yeah.
drone parenting where you're like right there. And now I've heard the latest one I heard is snowplow parenting, where you're like plowing everything in front of them to make sure nothing hurts them. And
Right.
of course, it's right to want to protect our kids, but I don't think I think the evidence supports this, that one of the causes for the epidemic of depression and anxiety is this snowplow parenting. Is the way
Mm.
to grow in resilience is to face small challenges, and we get stronger every time you face a small challenge, right? But if you don't face those small challenges, then when a big challenge comes, it knocks you for six. So the best way to grow in resilience, as far as I understand it, is so resilience is one of the courage virtues. So in Aquinas' schema, it's part of courage, which is the habit of not letting your fears get in the way of what you need to do. So you have fear or discomfort or sadness, but you need to get something done. You do it anyway. And then you start to realize that you're not a prisoner of those feelings, of those fears.
Mm.
Um, I like Dr. Kevin Major's work very well. If you're familiar with the Golden Hour podcast, he he talks about reframing your fear as a challenge.
Mm.
And so I'm afraid of public speaking. Okay, that's going to be a challenge. So I'm going to take on a small public speaking role, and I'm going to do that. And I
Mm.
realize it doesn't kill me. And then I'll try a bigger one, and then I'll try a bigger one. And eventually, it's no longer a fear. Same for fear of heights or fear of spiders. Psychiatrists call it exposure therapy. You have to be exposed to the thing you're afraid of in small doses, and that starts to make the fear have less of an effect on you, which is the same way of saying you're growing in resilience.
Mm.
I like that. Yeah, I think that's good.
How much does failure play a role in that? Like I'm trying to think, like like I said, my son's 2.5. I would say that he doesn't succeed in everything he does. But so like obvious, like my approach to parenting, perhaps being vulnerable here, is that I let him fail. And when he has something that's difficult for him to do, I do try and help him in it. But I also try never to do it for him if I'm confident that he can do it.
I think that's very much right. We have 6 kids, all went through Montessori education. And I think
Okay.
Maria Montessori really understood that. You see a kid like climbing up on a chair to get to a table, and then you go and pick them up. You sort of defeat the struggle. You want to let them.
Mm.
Obviously, you don't want them to be exposed to a struggle with a moving car in the middle of a road. Like anything
Right.
that's dangerous, they're actually gonna get hurt. You protect them from. But falling down here and there, just doing different things. Our kids were always the ones that other parents hated because we would let them climb anywhere. And I would be standing underneath. So if they ever fell, I would catch them. But
Mm-hmm.
generally they know what they're up to. And so you want to let them struggle, and then that's going to make them stronger, mentally, emotionally, kind of in every way, and resist that desire to want to cover them in bubble wrap.
Yeah. That's the Mythbusters on Discovery Channel. They had the failure is always an option. Instead of failure is not an option, failure is always an option.
Yeah.
Because that's how we learn. That's how we come to understand things in a better way.
Exactly. And you realize, hey, that didn't hear me. I'll try again, you know? Yeah.
Mm.
Right.
If you could give me the Montessori method in a nutshell, that, again, it's a tangent and potentially an unfair question, but I'm really interested in it. What are some of the tenets of it?
So I'm outside in. I just know from kind of what our kids did. But it's core to what she called the prepared environment. So everything in the classroom is kids scale so that kids can do, real work. And then they start to learn how to enjoy doing the thing right, which is formation and virtue. So my grandson is the same age, Matt, as your son. I was with him this weekend, and his dad bought a leaf blower that's pretty small, battery powered, pretty small. That my 2.5-year-old grandson can hold. Unfortunately, I didn't have my phone, so I couldn't film this. But we were outside in this. They had a big dumping of snow while we were there, and they have a little wooden bridge over to a little island on their property, a little fishing island kind of thing, really cute. So we were there, and little Owen with his snow blower, it's actually just a leaf blower, he's blowing the snow off the bridge, and he's doing it very effectively. He's like point blow, but very satisfying for him. It's like, okay, I did some work, and it.
Yeah.
I think that's the Montessori method seems to me is always all about the work, like having the kids do things that are age appropriate. They learn to cut with scissors, even with knives. They learn to boil water. Just like it's all supervised, and they become kind of more self-possessed. They start to realize, okay, I am in charge of what I do, and it all provides a great foundation, I think, for growth and virtue.
Yeah. It seems like the Montessori method also starts to get people, the kids rather, understanding pretty well what they're doing, even if they don't fully grasp the thing. So like I went the other day and saw my goddaughter at her homeschool co-op, where they do the catechesis of the Good Shepherd. And she's very young. Her vocabulary is not massive. And so I asked her to show me everything. And she pointed to their little tiny toy tabernacle. And she said, "That's the Jesus box."
That's great. I love it. I love it. Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, it does that
Right.
job.
Dr. Abela, is there I'm sure there is, so let me rephrase it. What is the virtue that would combat the vice of sloth or laziness?
So there's two kind of different elements to sloth. There's a sort of spiritual laziness, but then there's just sort of your basic kind of laziness. It's both the virtues of self-discipline and courage. So we were talking before about self-discipline. And the problem is, if you're the kind of person who represses your desires, then you won't have desires left. You won't have motivation. Like our emotions motivate, right? They lead us towards. That's what our desire. That's why we have desires. That's why God gave us desires. Otherwise, we would just sit there and do nothing. But if you try to repress your desires, then you're inclined to not. So that's one type of laziness where you have no desire. So the way to overcome that, to grow in self-discipline, is to find something that does attract you, and have that as your impetus, to start moving towards something. But the other kind might just be fear of failure, that comes out as laziness. So that
Right.
would be the virtue of courage. So both of the two big ones we talked about could address laziness.
So pursuing something that you feel attracted to through hardship can actually aid you in pursuing something that you're like that you don't want to do, right? I don't know. So like, this isn't a real example, but I love hockey. I don't play hockey, right? But I love hockey. And I suppose it would be incredibly difficult for me at the age of 28 to pick up the sport of hockey for the first time. That would be difficult. It's on ice, like I would have to learn various skills, right? But I love the game. And so I could see myself being motivated to learn that. And and overcoming difficulties, and that might help me develop the virtues necessary to like study for my comprehensive exam for my theology program,
Yep.
right? So that's what you're saying?
Yes.
And it's kind of like that same idea. The restraint muscle is the same muscle no matter what you're doing.
Exactly. So the diligence
Okay.
muscle is the same muscle as well. The
Okay.
courage muscle, the self-discipline. Yeah, they're all connected in the sense that any virtue that you grow in is going to strengthen the other virtues as well. But
Right.
particularly,
Okay.
you take one approach to a certain virtue, it will help you in other domains of that same virtue. So yes, so you start with something that you like, and that's how you like start studying something you like. That's going to build up diligence, and then you can use that diligence in other areas where it's maybe less attractive to you.
I know you've provided with the book the graph that's behind me, this chart that kind of gives you all these virtues, and I did put that up on purpose. I just wanted to impress you with the fact that I read your book.
I was hoping it's always there. So,
It's
He
might
actually, it's above his bed. So when he wakes up first thing in the morning,
that's the first thing I see. And
Yes,
it makes me
yeah.
think about virtues and how to be more virtuous. But as I was looking at it, and as I was reading through all the different virtues that you talk about, and how these are the great super habits that help in so many different areas, and precisely to that point of the way that building the muscle in one area is going to affect how that's applied then in other places also, I started thinking about the way that some of these connect to other virtues that it may not immediately be evident, but suddenly something here will come up. I was thinking about it as I read in the practical wisdom portion of the book. You have the virtue of teachability,
Mhm.
that I'm willing to learn. I'm willing to go and look for information. I'm willing to be given information by someone else. I started thinking about how teachability is really only possible, especially for an adult, if you have humility.
wow.
If you're able to be humble enough to know I don't know something. I think teachability is more like natural when you're a little kid.
Yep.
I don't know certain things because I haven't gotten to that point yet.
Mhm.
I'm not quite old enough yet. But then as we get older, the more we're educated, the less teachable we become sometimes.
It's true. It's true.
But teachability is such a great gift when you understand it from that perspective of, humility tells me I don't know everything and I'm not the only one in the room. Teachability allows me to not just recognize that reality, that truth of humility, but also to go and seek for greater knowledge and for help and assistance.
Yeah. So practical wisdom is the classically called prudence, but so many of the virtue words kind of have drifted in their meaning. But I prefer practical wisdom, which is the habit of making wise decisions. And Aquinas says if you're going to make decisions, you need to gather the relevant information. And so teachability is one way of doing that. It's like learning from others, Memory is another, just kind of recalling what you know. And then creativity is another in terms of coming up with new knowledge, and then you use all of that, you use reasoning to kind of process your way through that. But you're right, absent humility, it's hard to be teachable. The virtues are all in some way connected with each other,
Mhm.
Yeah.
So does that apply to the? So I wrote it down here because I didn't want to forget. But you've on your chart you have the intellectual life, the spiritual life, and then what I gathered as the cardinal virtues breaking into this incredible array of virtues. So is it fair to say, since they're all interconnected, that growth in the cardinal virtues can lead to a deepening of the theological virtues? Is that possible? Because the origin of theological virtues, right? That's grace. No?
That's right. So the theological virtues are different from all the others in that
Mhm.
you can only get them from grace. They are infused. You cannot,
Right.
through your own effort, grow in faith, But you
Mhm.
can grow. What growth in the cardinal virtues will do is make the seedbed more fertile for growth in faith. If you're lacking in
Right.
discipline, if you're filled with lust, it's hard to grow in
Right.
charity, or hope.
Right.
Yeah. Or
Right.
if you're filled with greed, or gluttony, or growth in the cardinal virtues helps you become a more ordered human being, a more flourishing human being, and therefore more receptive to growth in the theological
Right.
virtues.
Right. Grace builds on nature.
Nature, precisely.
So,
Precisely. I
right.
mean, just to complicate things further, there are also this kind of
Perfect. That's what we want.
okay.
Yeah.
Grace also strengthens the cardinal virtues too, right? The gifts of the Spirit, they not only contribute to the theological virtues, but also the cardinal virtues as well. So there's a
Mm.
gift of fortitude that would go with the virtue of courage, because Aristotle's project of the virtues ultimately fails because we cannot, on our own strength, become fully flourishing human beings because of original sin. We'll always get taken down because of that. So grace, the gifts of the Spirit, help us grow even in the natural virtues, and in fact, it's necessary for full growth in those virtues. So it's not just learning about the virtues and practicing, but it's pray for the graces, pray for the gifts as well.
How do we introduce people then into that idea of praying for the virtues while also teaching them the importance of personal investment in them? Because you're right, because grace builds on nature. God's not going to give us something if we're not going to cooperate with His grace. So there's a collaboration that we have with God, which is in itself sort of a miraculous privilege that we have to cooperate with the things that God gives to us. And because these are also virtues that it is possible to obtain at least some of these virtues just on a natural human level. And these are virtues that can be recognized as virtues across cultures, across religions. These are human things that allow for full human flourishing. But there is this really important spiritual dimension. I don't know how well it can be seen, but on the chart, the spiritual life connects directly to humanity. There's no intermediate steps along the way. And so if we want people to be virtuous, and we can teach them some of the natural habits and the super habits, we can teach them a lot of these things, but is there a way that you have found that's helpful for teaching people, encouraging people, forming them so that they can pray with those virtues or pray for those virtues and then receive them more openly?
So there's a beautiful analogy from a medieval theologian called John of St. Thomas. And he talks about the growth in virtue is like rowing a boat. And the more you row, the stronger you get. The boat goes faster in the direction you want it to go. But when you hoist up a sail, the sail is like the gifts of the Holy Spirit for catching grace. And so now grace is coming in, infused courage, for example, if you're growing in courage, the boat is still going in that same direction, but it's going faster and with less effort on your part, and I think it's a great analogy. And so what we need to do is we need to practice ourselves to grow in the virtue. So that's the bit we can do. And then we need to pray and be receptive and ask God to bless and give us the grace to grow further in courage, say, or further in wisdom, and it's always a both and effort, right? I mean, this is, as you said, Father Sam, it's a great, great privilege, right? That the creator of the universe gave us free will and then expects us to use it, So the one thing that God cannot do is override our free will, or he refuses to, right? Because it would no longer be free will. And so there's a role for us to play, including in our own sanctification, including in our own growth in virtue. So we do that part, but we pray for his help as well. So
I've heard it. I've heard a what's it called? Is it called an acronym where you're spelling a word with the letters? The letters all represent a separate word. I think it was for discernment. The acronym was pray, praise, repentance, ask, yield. And I have thought a lot about what yield means, and it seems like it's used here, right? It feels like you yield to the virtues, you yield to the infused virtues. So I guess my question is, how do you yield to the infused virtues? Like, because I don't think that you're implying that I have to have started rowing first in order for that sail to catch the grace, if you will. It's not like my effort must occur prior to the reception of grace.
That's correct. Certainly not must, because God can do anything, right? He can infuse
Right.
all kinds of virtues, right? But if you're sitting around waiting for him to give you the grace to be virtuous, then you're sort of missing the point, I think. You got to get going, because you're already baptized, right? So now move on. It's like get going. I think of yield in terms of surrender, right? To surrender to God's will. And if we do that, every circumstance in our lives is an occasion to grow in virtue and to grow in love of him, right? So something bad happens, something scary happens, occasion to grow in courage, right? Somebody's annoying, occasion to grow in love, So every circumstance of life is an occasion, I say, can be used as occasion to grow in virtue.
Right. I mean, it's right. I haven't read it, but it's a very famous book, right? Abandonment to Divine Providence, right? If you actually do that, then every moment he's working through every moment, right? How could he not, right?
Yeah.
That's the thing.
Yeah.
It's the reason why changing a baby's diaper can be an occasion to grow in virtue.
Exactly. Yeah.
Now, given that you've written a full book about these super habits and virtues, is there one more than another that you see especially important in the work that you do as the dean of a business school? Is there one that you see more challenging in the business world over another?
No, because it's always contingent on who you are and your own circumstances. Every business person faces a different set of circumstances. I can tell you what I find very common, because we have an app called the Grow Virtue app, which maybe you've seen, as Grow Virtue as one word, and it's on the Apple Store and the Google Play Store, and anybody can download it, and it'll do a diagnostic. You answer a bunch of questions, and it will give you rankings of your virtues, and then it uses AI to help you find a daily practice that you can do, and then it will remind you every day. So we've done that with a number of companies, and so we can see the averages across companies. Where are the biggest weaknesses, if you will? And not uncommon, for example, is the virtue of eutrapelia, a Greek word for, in effect, we use it to mean leisure. So it's kind of making good use of leisure time. And the two extremes devices against eutrapelia are, on the one hand, being frivolous and goofing around, wasting your life. But the other extreme, common, is just not taking any time to relax, not taking any time for yourself, not taking any time for things you enjoy just because you enjoy them. I have a whole chapter on that in the book, as you probably remember. It was my favorite chapter to write, I have to say.
It was a good one.
Thank you. It was the most autobiographical for me of the rest of the chapters are about other people. That one's about me, because I think I was the stereotypical workaholic when I was younger. And I think there are a lot of people around. And I don't want to suggest that there's anything evil about work, but if you're trying to find your happiness in your work, there's a reason God created the Sabbath. So we're supposed to rest and enjoy and worship. So that's a big one, I think. Very important. Another one, somewhat surprising, is one of the virtues of practical wisdom called preparedness, which is trying to anticipate things that'll happen. Aquinas says that life is full of bad accidents and chance and so on. So we should try to think carefully about what might happen and what we would do about it. And I find that often missing in business as well.
Okay. But preparedness, it's the being prepared for real things and for possibilities, while also understanding that there are some things that it's not possible to prepare for, in the sense of they can't teach you everything. You
Oh,
want to
sure.
anticipate as best you can certain
Yeah.
things, and yeah,
But that as best you can is important. There's some people who just
and
give up
without
in
becoming
advance.
anxious, maybe.
Yeah,
You know,
exactly. You
yeah,
you do your preparation, you try to anticipate all the possible problems, you have your contingency plans, and then it's in God's hands, you know? Yeah.
right, right,
Hmm.
But to
yeah,
just say it's all in God's hands and I'm not going to bother, that's a lack of virtue.
right, right. That's frivolous, and
Yes, exactly. Exactly.
I liked your example of Theodore Hook, London's most notorious prankster, and his especially his prank shutting down the entire street by just sending all kinds of deliveries to this poor lady's house. I just like the idea that the entire city of London had one guy who everybody knew was the guy who was pulling off all these pranks.
Yeah.
That to me is incredible. I can't imagine. I can't think of a single person in my town who's known for their pranks and who's known town-wide for it. I can't think of any. It's just such a fascinating idea. But then you realize that's what he was known for because that was his entire life.
Yeah.
There
Yeah.
was he had nothing else going on.
He was so talented, and all of that talent was wasted on these pranks. And I mean, 300
Mm.
years later, we're still talking about his pranks, you know? And,
Yeah.
but he died at a fairly young age because he didn't live a healthy life. He left no money. He had left a wife and children in poverty. You know, it's like,
Mm.
dude, I'm not sure what you were up to, but it wasn't good. You know, so you got a few laughs out of it, yes, but you could have used those talents much more constructively. So,
Yeah.
Mm.
Oh, it's wild. I'm grateful in a particular, I think the context of this book coming out of your work as dean of the Busch School of Business, because there's, I think so often as we look at different corporations and businesses, there seems to just be a lack of virtue underlying a lot of practices, a lot of the ways that people approach the work that they do. Um, this is maybe a little bit off of the book topic itself, but what are some places where you think that a Catholic university can offer a unique perspective on good business practice and really form people well to enter into that world of business?
well, it's actually funny. I recently gave a lecture at the Acton Institute at their annual academic conference. And I posted actually a video of the lecture on my Substack. So this Superhabits Substack, where I write and post stuff kind of beyond the book, you know. But in preparation for that lecture, I went through almost 100 years worth of management research. And the general conclusion is virtuous behavior in business, understood in the correct term of the word, the correct understanding of the word virtue, meaning excellence, which is not just moral excellence, but practical excellence itself, yeah, as well. You know, so doing things right and doing the right things, you know, the practice of virtue leads to better business outcomes. And so then you would think, well, why wouldn't more people be virtuous in business if you're going to make more money? You know, like that, isn't that why you went in the first place? So off you go, you know? And I think the answer is if you're not, so virtues are habits, right? Super habits. If you don't have those habits, it's hard to get jump started, even if there's a financial incentive. You know, you have to be trying to live the virtuous life, and then you bring that to business. And so that's what we try to do with our students. So, and it really works when they show up day one, they're off to the races, you know, and they're already being successful. And so we have companies coming back saying, give us more of those kids, you know, we really like your students. And I think I have to believe that the virtue piece is got a lot to do with it, you know.
Earlier in this interview, you said the three requirements for the growth in virtue. Would you repeat those one more time?
Yeah. So it's understanding what is virtue, understanding kind of what the virtues are and what it means to grow in virtue and virtue as a habit of excellence. That's the first. The second is having examples, role models, whether in real life or in history or fiction, movies, you know, examples of what virtuous behavior looks like for each particular virtue. And then the third is, and most important in some ways, is practice. Daily practice, small steps, baby steps,
Right.
little bite-sized pieces that you do each day builds the habit, builds each super habit.
So when it comes to the context of teaching children virtues, young children, like I know I keep bringing my son up, but he's my oldest. My oldest is 2.5. So like I'm thinking about this within the context of how do I teach a 3-year-old, soon to be 3-year-old virtue.
Yep.
And it's like he's not gonna understand munificence. It ain't happening. I've tried to play Monopoly. That wouldn't teach it anyway. But I was just trying to think of a toy money.
Yeah.
Also, as an aside, sometimes when I am praying and I know I need magnanimity, I pray for munificence instead, just because I think it's funny. But I also pray for magnanimity.
That's good.
Yeah. But so like, I could do certain aspects of that, which is like I could have him do things, right? And so maybe he'll like develop this uninformed habit. But I could see how that would help him eventually to, like, once he understands it, to grow in the virtue.
Yep.
Right. So is it fair that, like, those 3 things are necessary, but, like, maybe it's incremental,
Yeah, but it has to be age appropriate. So a 3-year-old is not really going to understand the idea of virtue, right? As you said.
Right. Yeah.
But you can start to expect certain kinds of behaviors,
Right.
I think you really start this. Your real opportunity for growth in virtue comes around the age of reason. So 5, 6,
Yeah.
7, 8, whenever. When they can start to understand causes and effects and understand, and so the one thing I would say is I think some people sometimes worry about rewarding kids for good behavior because then you're afraid when I take away the reward, will the good behavior go away, But I think with virtue, you don't have to worry about that. Because as people start to repeat the good behavior, it becomes a habit and is a joy in exercising virtue, right? The habit of virtue, any habit. And so when you take away the rewards, they'll continue the behavior because it's a habit and because it feels good, So I wouldn't hesitate to encourage them in different ways, to do the virtuous thing.
Awesome. That's good because I wanted to reward him anyway.
There you go.
So this makes it a lot easier.
Good.
Positive reinforcement. It goes a long way.
It does.
Yeah. As I think this would be to quote you, Father Sam, but I'm pretty sure it was you. That an attaboy, it goes a long way.
It does. It really
can.
does.
Yeah.
The perspective that you gave me here in this book that really struck me was the idea of forgiveness, and how being forgiving allows you to actually delegate more responsibility to others. And I guess part of it was I was reading this wondering, okay, what's the application to business school that he's going to go for here? But then I started thinking about it as a pastor. And I know my staff will tell you I have a tendency to try to just do everything myself. And they'll tell you they look forward to the times when I go away on vacation so that I'm not in the office for a little while because they get relief from dealing with me. And I know that that's part of the reason I have to take vacation, even if I don't want to necessarily use Eutrapelia very well. I need to get away so that they can have that space. But I hadn't really thought about it because I don't think that there's much in the way of a need for me to forgive my staff. They've not wronged me in any way. They're very nice people, and they seem to love me and take good care of me. So I'm very grateful for them. But that idea of forgiveness, it was such an expansive way of looking at it. I hadn't thought of it that way. I got to thinking, all right, if I'm going to delegate things to my staff, that means I'm in anticipation. I'm already giving them permission to fail. I'm giving them permission not to do something perfectly.
Yep.
And instead I'm trusting, I give this to you. And so I've already sort of forgiven any place where you might not know exactly what I was thinking when I asked you to do this, or I've already forgiven that place where you don't know how to do something. And I just never thought that way for myself. But it resonated so much for me that if I won't give someone a responsibility, if I won't delegate a responsibility, then I'm holding something against them in a certain way. perhaps not intentionally, but in some way I'm holding something against him. I was really struck by that. Um, and is there any more to that I should be thinking about?
Well, it part of the fun in writing the book was I was delivered through stories, as you've noticed. But it's the work of Aquinas, and then I mashed it up with the social science, so kind of contemporary research. So you don't just have to believe Thomas, even though he's awesome. You can also look at the science as well. You can see how beautifully these come together. And so I was reading him and on the virtue of clemency is how he describes it. So I just use forgiveness because that's what sort of people understand, you know. And it you kind of you logic through it and go, okay, so if a leader is not forgiving, then people aren't going to take risks. If people aren't going to take risks, there's not going to be any innovation, you know. That people aren't going to be enterprising. And so I was looking in the management research, and lo and behold, someone did a study and found among a large number of companies, they did surveys and so on, that if the leaders are forgiving, you actually get more innovation in the company. And if they aren't, then you don't. You know, so if you want to delegate, and you need to delegate, if you want a flourishing enterprise of any kind, whether it's a parish or a company or a school, then you also have to be forgiving when people try their best efforts and fail. Now, if they're being lazy or so on, then they need to be disciplined. You know, but if they're trying hard and reasonably and so fail, then you have to be forgiving. Otherwise, the next person won't try. You know.
Well, I got to try to be forgiving then.
It's in your job description, isn't it, Father?
It is. It's a thing. But I hope my staff will tell me that I'm forgiving enough. Yeah. Well, Dr. Abela, this is phenomenal. I'm very grateful. Where can people find more about the Superhabits? Can you give us your Substack again, and any other things that we need to make sure that we include in our show notes for our listeners?
So it's superhabit.substack.com. Superhabit singular. Substack.com has lots and lots of writings about superhabits beyond the book. It also has a link to the Grow Virtue app as well. So those would be two good places. I am also on LinkedIn if somebody wants to follow me or connect there. I tend to post on LinkedIn as well. So
fantastic. Well, Dr. Abela, thanks so much for joining us today. This was fantastic.
Thank you.
Are you a fan of The Simpsons?
You know what? I've never seen a single episode of The Simpsons.
Are you kidding?
Isn't that crazy?
That is
I
crazy.
haven't. I've never seen a single episode.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
So as we were talking about the sort of doing whatever you want being one extreme, and then the never doing anything lest you, by having a desire, somehow do the wrong thing, that extreme. There's a great Simpsons episode where this sort of self-help guru comes to Springfield. That's the name of the town where the Simpsons live. And in this large town meeting, Bart Simpson makes an armpit fart. And it's something like that, right?
Yeah.
He says, "Why did you do that?" And he says, "I don't know. I do what I feel." And he turns that, this guru turns that into the whole motto: do what you feel. And so
right.
they have a do what you feel day. And everybody is just doing whatever they feel like. And in all of this, as everybody's doing whatever they feel like, at first it's this sense of, well, this is kind of nice. I get to do whatever I feel like. And there's something fun about it because everybody's kind of letting loose with like no inhibitions, no restraints or anything. But pretty soon they start to realize that what I feel might be in conflict with what you feel. And so they start to realize that just because they feel like something doesn't necessarily mean that there's going to be good outcomes. So everybody ends up miserable because of this do what you feel. Right. They have to start figuring out. I don't know that the Simpsons ever really do a deep dive into virtue.
Yeah,
I think what they ultimately end up with is sort of the idea that you have to think about others besides yourself. But like the point is well taken. Do what you feel. It's only going to take us so far, right?
Right. And so what you're saying is you could read Superhabits or watch The Simpsons. Is that what you're saying?
Look. The Simpsons have accurately predicted the future many times over.
Right.
This
Yeah.
has
Yeah.
happened, and I'm maybe I'm too willing to find the theological or philosophical
Mm-hmm.
meaning in pop culture and in movies and TV shows
Mm-hmm.
and everything. I might have a bad habit of that. That might not be one of my virtues. I don't know. But I tend to see that even
An
like,
over intellectualization.
well, see, here's the thing. Reading Superhabits by Dr. Andrew Abela,
Mm-hmm.
uh,
Hold it
I'm
up one
not
more time.
sure. Yeah, hold it up one more time. I'm not sure that it is just an over intellectualization. I think that what he's
Mhm.
done here is he's pointed out how these virtues, they are accessible even to people who don't necessarily have faith.
Totally.
They're accessible on a natural level. They contribute to true human flourishing, and if they contribute to true human flourishing, then I mean, more and more, what we're going to have to start to see is how that true human flourishing, uh, it's what allows us to look beyond ourselves,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
On a human level, we have to do this. On a human level, this is necessary. So anyway, I didn't want to interrupt and throw The Simpsons at a dean of a college,
Right.
a
An
university's
incredibly
school.
well-respected university.
Exactly. I felt that might be beneath the dignity, but not your dignity.
Yeah. No. Fair enough.
But
Fair enough. You were my chaplain, so fair enough.
you dressed like a college professor today.
Yeah,
Don. I've
yeah.
got to give you credit for that because
Yeah.
you
I
were
went
on
with
point
the,
with some of your questions. It was great.
Yeah, it was fun. It was fun. Well, this is something that, like, the more and more I read things like this, I find that it's actually just a personal passion. You know,
Yeah.
like, I really like, I think ultimately, I didn't ask this, but I wanted to. Most of this falls, again, under the category of human formation.
Yeah.
You know, like, so much of this. And I think that the reason I'm so passionate about it is because I see how much it's lacking today in, like, modern pedagogy, you know? Like, I just don't think it exists in, like, most high schools. You know, like,
Yeah.
so, like, it's, I don't know. I just love it. I just love
Yeah.
it. So,
Yeah. Another thing we
Yeah.
didn't really get into too much with him, but which could be very interesting is he's done such a good job of summarizing what the virtues are.
Mhm.
But then he kind of leaves it open that
Mhm.
he's not given a program for how to implement each of these virtues or each of these super habits. And instead, he
Mhm.
kind of leaves it at, can you recognize what the virtue is? Do you see it?
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
then you're going to have to figure out in your own particulars how exactly to do it. And I got to thinking with some of these, I'd like to go back and just reread his section. Sometimes it's just a page. It's not even that long
Mhm.
that he spends talking about some of these virtues. I'd like to
Mhm.
go back and reread it and give some more thought to how exactly I could do it. It was a pretty fast read.
Mhm.
I'm not
Mhm.
saying that to brag. I'm saying that
No,
as
but it's
as a
okay.
fact.
You are bragging a little bit, but it's
Well,
okay.
no, the book arrived on Friday in the mail, and it's now Monday. So I
Hey,
had
man, I'm impressed. I'm impressed. And you know what? I'm going to give you credit where credit's due, okay? You've been reading the book.
if it
You've been
wasn't
reading
for
the book.
look, we had a snow day. If it wasn't for all that
Nice.
snow and having to
Right,
cancel
yeah.
some afternoon activities, I wouldn't have gotten through it in time for the interview.
Yeah. Well, but you know what? I'm giving you credit anyway.
I appreciate
you deserve
that.
it.
Thank
Because
you.
you could have exercised a vice and watched a whole bunch of The Simpsons.
Nope.
But
Instead,
instead,
I was
Nice.
self-restraint. I persevered. I was resilient. Yeah,
yes,
all those. Yes, all of it.
exactly.
No, it was really interesting reading it. I said he's not giving so much a program as he's identifying what these are.
These
and
like
then,
guiding principles.
Yeah, and then he's leaving
Yeah.
it to his reader to figure out, all right, where do I need to plug this one in, or where does this one need to be more present in my life? And I think that's a phenomenal way to do this.
Yeah.
Because ultimately, yeah, I want to have all of the virtues, but the reality is that there are certain virtues that I'm going to need more frequently than others, right?
Yeah,
There are certain habits that I'll need to exercise more often, or that just my life will require of me more than other virtues.
Right. I also, something else that I didn't get to say when he brought it up is I actually I had never heard of resilience as overcoming like a sorrow. And I think that but I have heard the word resilience used within the context of modern psychology. So I got a new way of looking at the idea of teaching. Like people say, like we're going to teach kids to be resilient, or they'll say things like kids are resilient, But this idea that resilience helps you push through sorrow, in a culture where like everything is determined by like, well, what do you want to do?
Yeah.
And it's so emotionally based. I was like, oh my gosh, like that is just a game changer. It's just a full blown game changer. So I really can't suggest this book enough to anybody, or to everybody, whatever the right way of saying that. I like the book. That's what I'm trying to say.
You should get it.
You should get the book. So again, Superhabits, Dr. Andrew Abela, Dean of the Busch School of Business. We're grateful he came on. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching today's video. Let us know what you thought down below, and don't forget to like and subscribe.